Hello, everyone. This is M.R. Rangaswamy, the founder of Indiaspora. Welcome to today's session, the Indiaspora Climate Summit. I'm here again with my cohort in crime, Sanjeev Joshipura. Welcome, Sanjeev, our executive director.
Hey, Amar. Hi from sunny Washington, D.C. How's it in California this morning?
Yeah, it's good, but we have to start by really sending our prayers to our family and friends in India, who I know are going through really tough times this week with COVID. But that's upon us today, and I hope we all deal with it successfully. But the climate mitigation and climate risk is also an existential threat to India and the world. And in both with COVID and with climate change, what it shows us is we all got to work together, Sanjeev. You know, that's what we got to do.
That's exactly right. I think you said it aptly. I mean, COVID is upon us and it's wreaking havoc right now in India, the second wave, the second surge. But climate change is also not to be forgotten. That's aptly put. MR, I think it would be a good idea to introduce Indiaspora a little bit to those of the folks who are watching today who may not know a lot about us.
Yeah, please. You're the executive director. I'll let you do the honors.
I'll do that gladly. Thank you. So welcome to the program, everyone, and thanks for joining. We are looking forward to a very exciting India session of the Indiaspora Climate Summit. Indiaspora is a nonprofit organization founded in 2012, and MR is our founder. Our mission is to position the global Indian diaspora as a force for good. We also serve as a bridge between Indian diaspora leaders and India. And there are three pillars that we focus on. One of them is being a catalyst and a platform for philanthropy and social impact. Another is encouraging nonpartisan political and civic engagement. And a third is fostering entrepreneurship and innovation. This is something that we are now increasingly doing on a global scale. While we were founded here in America and are very active here, we are also opening an office in India as we speak in the next couple of months. And we have also started working very actively with diaspora in several other countries with large Indian origin populations, such as the UK, Singapore, Canada, and the UAE. And really looking forward to having this first Indiaspora Climate Summit during Earth Week, just as we are approaching Earth Day. But MR, I know that one of your passion, as some of us know, is running networks and building networks of like-minded people. I know one of the other organizations you run is the Corporate Eco Forum, and that's germane to the conversation we are having today. Do you just want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, Sanjeev, thanks for asking that question. I've been involved in the climate space for about 15 years when I founded the Corporate Eco Forum, which is a group of 70 of the world's largest companies like Amazon and Apple and Disney and UPS and many others, to work with their chief sustainability officers to mitigate climate risk, to help reduce greenhouse gases, increase renewable energy purchases, and build sustainable supply chains. And so it's heartening for us to have a climate summit here as well in a very different way. This is where we hope Indiaspora can be a catalyst and a convener, inspire people. We are going to showcase some great inspiring speakers this morning and this evening, as well as collaboration. We're going to talk about how people can collaborate. And finally, as you know, we're going to also have some breakout rooms where all the participants can actually talk about taking action and actually take action, like my good friend Rob Swan will tell us in a little bit. So that's the gist of it. I think we got an amazing program, and we'll lay out the agenda again in the chat box so you can see all the speakers coming up. But I think without further ado, Sanjeev, I'll let you do the honors and introduce our first keynote speaker of this morning.
Absolutely. And the theme of our India session today is how do you prosper in a net zero economy? And for that, to kick it off, we are delighted and honored to welcome our keynote speaker. He will speak on the topic of a paradigm shift, the net zero opportunity for India. He is none other than Satya Tripathi, the Secretary General at the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, and formerly the UN Assistant Secretary General and head of the New York office of UN Environment. Satya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, based on where you are. It's a rare privilege for me to be speaking to to fellow Indians across the planet. And I deem it a privilege because this is the first time I'm doing it. And I have been at it for a while as an international civil servant until 2 weeks ago, when I decided to move to the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet as its first Secretary General. The power of the Indian diaspora, or for that matter, any diaspora, is underemphasized mostly. And it is time we leveraged our strengths and showcased the best of us across the planet in support of people and planet. And of course, in that conversation, India holds center stage. Let me explain why. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge the amazing champions that are going to be speaking in different sessions today. I have had the privilege of knowing many of them. And of course, at the end of it, you'll be hearing some beautiful music, the Earth song from Ricky Cage. And you will see that the song and the music is as soulful and pure as the people and the thoughts it represents. Let me start by talking a bit about where India is in the global context. Now, India's per capita emissions are about 1.9 tons, as opposed to the ideal average that should be about 2.1 tons per capita. That's what IPCC tells us. So in that sense, Indians are actually performing well. They're under the ideal average that we ought to be at. But the trouble is that we are doubling roughly every 9 to 10 years, as has been evidenced in the last decade. So with that, we would easily surpass any of the largest emitters, the two ahead of us, that is China and the United States, in a few decades, if not earlier. But also the challenge is that what is it doing to us? What is the cost of climate mitigation and adaptation for India? India may not have played a big part or even a small part in the challenge that confronts humanity, but India will certainly have to play a critical part in amending all the wrongs that have been done to Mother Earth over the last 100 years or so. And when we talk about net zero, many people frame it as a challenge. I frame it as an opportunity. When people frame it as a challenge, what they say is that, well, it was never India's problem to solve. That's the broader context in which people talk. And they would be basically telling the truth that India really didn't contribute much to the global pollution. The global carbon budget for a 2-degree future is about 2,900 gigatons. And we are roughly 300 short of shooting past that milestone, in which you will not be able to stay at a under 2 degrees Celsius global warming scenario by the turn of the century. Forget the turn of the century. The World Meteorological Organization a few months ago came up with this latest report, which tells us actually we have a 70% chance of getting to 1.5 degrees of global warming in the next 5 years. And then that would have a telling effect on countries with coastlines, countries with all kinds of entrenched indicators that actually make it impossible for people to get out of the poverty trap. And of course, we well know, being Indians, that India has about 7,200 kilometers of coastline, and most of the impoverished, the vulnerable, the poor that depend on artisanal and coastal fisheries for their protein needs are all living along the coastline. So when the sea levels rise, and mind you, we're at 415 parts per million of carbon concentration in the atmosphere. Last time we were anywhere near these kind of numbers was 3 million years ago. And at that time, the sea levels were actually 20 meters higher. And of course, people ask you the counter question, the skeptics, so why aren't we seeing those levels of sea level rise? Because this has all happened in 100 years' time, too short a time frame. And of course, you will see all those impacts cascading, and we're already seeing them actually. If you look at the Arctic ice shelves literally breaking apart, the size of continental ice shelves, and melting 30 times faster than they were in the 80s and the 90s. So the evidence is staring us in our face. Now, what's the opportunity for India? Now, the opportunity is this. When people say that I'll get to net zero by 2060 or 2050 or 2045, as is the case of Sweden, it's all great, but I have a different experience, unfortunately. I call it greenwash, because if you look at something that I was involved in 2015, the New York Declaration on Forests, a lot of big corporations came together and said, we're going to really do something that will be miraculous in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, lots of promises. In 2020, we did a study, a lot of partner organizations, of course, coming together, and we found that those promises counted for precious little. And so when people say that net zero without common measures, without common standards, it is really difficult to understand what people mean by net zero. It's a great conversation. As I often say, the road to nothing is peppered with great conversations. That's what has been happening for the last 30 years in the climate conversations. We've had some great COPs and some not so great COPs, the conferences of parties, and we've produced precious little in terms of results. Now, are these conversations important? Of course they are. They're very important. Countries, stakeholders all need to come together and speak with each other, because when we stop speaking, we start fighting. So that's a great thing to have. But we also need to produce action that the planet desperately needs, and the planet, our motherland, India, desperately needs. And in that, Jane was talking a little while earlier about the Dahlberg report that came out just this morning. $95 billion of economic impact for air pollution in India. 2019 Lancet report that came out last year tells us that we're losing 1.67 million people. That's 16.7 lakhs. People die every year due to air pollution. Now, in that report, there's hope, because they say that compared to the 90s, if you look at it now, we have actually saved 64% people that were dying of indoor air pollution, domestic air pollution. Our mothers and our sisters who stay at home and mostly do the cooking in very unhealthy circumstances. That has changed because science has helped. The energy efficient cook stoves, the Ujjwala program of the government of India, that has really engineered a paradigm shift. So there are these examples of we actually doing exponentially well in some of the areas, whereas the other areas we haven't. So what's the opportunity for India here? Now, India, of course, has agriculture, which accounts for 18% of the emissions. Scientists tell us that by 2030, we'll be at 515 million tons of emissions from the agriculture sector. Now, something revolutionary is happening in India. If you look at Andhra Pradesh, they're doing something called the community managed natural farming program, where the input costs are dropping exponentially and the output keeps increasing steadily over crop cycle. And then what is happening is that as of today, 1 million farmers have changed behavior. When we, the so-called wise and intelligent people, get around these conversations and talk about risks, we forget that there are people whose resilience is this little, who live from one crop cycle to another crop cycle, and their entire families and their children, their schooling and their nutrition, everything depends on it. They are willing to change behavior, despite the fact that the resilience is this little and ours is this big. So we really need to take inspiration from these smallholder farmers in different landscapes in India, not just Andhra Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and different parts of the states around the country. And these numbers add up to almost 3 million farmers that have changed behavior, but that's still a small number. We have 120 million smallholders, 160 million hectares of cropland in India. Imagine what happens when everybody changes behavior. India could actually produce not just the mitigation of the 515 million tons by 2030, but it can also produce carbon sequestration amazing numbers. Because as we know, the soil could hold 3 times as much carbon as there is in the atmosphere. So if we can do that through sustainable agriculture, through natural farming, and through organic farming as well, although that's a much more expensive option, that could change. Anita talked about the burning of crop biomass and the work that TNC and other partners are doing in North India. That could actually change the paradigm if we can find a business model where we take all the crop biomass, convert it into bioenergy, biogas, compressed natural gas, or compressed biogas as they call it. And the government has a serious program, and we are working with the Ministry of Petroleum and Biofuels on that. And then last but not the least, the 63 million small and medium enterprises in India that contribute a lot to the problem, but very little to the solution, because nobody is really thinking of them as a part of the solution. They're at best a problem on the fringes, or at worst, a problem that we can forget about. But it is time to actually respect their contributions to the economy, which is phenomenal, the employment, both in the formal and the informal sector. And if we work with them to aggregate their problems and find system scale solutions, and it's not really rocket science. Pick up a few districts, break the back of the problem, find what gives, produce solutions and the resources. And that's why we founded the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. We intend to produce $1 trillion of development impact in the next 10 years. And we're starting with India. We're working on a $10 billion climate adaptation fund, because mitigation is somebody else's problem, honestly. It's the world that has produced the emissions, and India cannot be expected to provide the solutions to that mitigation challenge. India should certainly provide solutions to the adaptation challenge, because it has to deal with its own problems: the air pollution, the unsustainable agriculture, the ecosystems that are literally disintegrating as I speak, and of course, the public health crisis that aids and abets COVID-19 kind of diseases, because zoonotic diseases affect those that are much more immunocompromised, which is a lot of people in our own country. So the solutions are there. And when other countries are desperately looking for residual emissions that they can, basically they need somebody else to produce the carbon sequestration numbers or the mitigation numbers that they can get the offsets for them, India could be at the front of the line producing hundreds of billions of dollars of offsets by both saving its people, its public health, its ecosystems, and becoming a resurgent country, while of course serving the rest of the world with the offsets. So we have a tremendous opportunity, and the diaspora has an amazing role to play in it. We look forward to working with you in capitalizing and actualizing that promise. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Satya. What an inspirational opening keynote, where you really laid out the problems, but you also tackled the solutions. And I know you've done tremendous work in your role at the UN and now in this new job as Secretary General as well. And what I'd like to do now is move on to our next speaker, our next keynote, where we will hear a TED-like talk and then a Q&A session with a dear friend of mine, Rob Swan, OBE, as they call him in England. And Rob is a dear friend I met several years ago. He's on our advisory board at the Corporate Eco Forum, but he's also become a very good friend. And he's not only the first person to walk to the South Pole and the North Pole, but a little known fact is he also bicycled around India to bring awareness to climate change, which he calls the most dangerous mission in his life. And beyond that, he then decides to save tigers in India. So to demonstrate awareness for that, he puts on a tiger suit and actually runs in the Mumbai Marathon. What an amazing achievement. But it's not, he doesn't stop with just the physical activities. He's this human phenomenon who inspires people, as we'll see in his keynote. So back to now to visit with Rob Swan.
At 11, I saw a film about the My name is Robert Swan, and I'm delighted to share our story with you all today. It's a story about doing what you say you're going to do. And at the age of 11, I saw a film about the real explorers who went to the North and South Poles. And I made a commitment that one day I would become the first person to walk to the North and South Poles. And I was just so inspired that at last, maybe one day, I could visit this extraordinary ice kingdom at the bottom of the world, the Antarctic. After years of battle to raise money and keep things going, we now head to the South Pole, 900 miles on foot, 3 of us, 70 days on foot, really hard work, no backup, no radios, no way out if we made mistakes. And it was an extraordinary experience to be standing in an area twice the size of Australia and pretty much be on our own with no backup. And after 70 days, we reached the South Geographic Pole. It was a great moment. We were so proud of what we had achieved. And something happened to me walking to the South Pole that really brought me to come and speak to you all today. And my eyes changed color through damage. Our faces had blistered away. The skin came away. We didn't know why. But on return home, we were told by NASA that we'd walked under the hole in the ozone layer. It was discovered while we were walking, so it was a bit of a shock. The ultraviolet rays had come through the hole, hit the ice, bounced back and fried our faces off. And this started me thinking that maybe I should do something about our survival on this planet. First, we had to go to the North Pole. That was the dream. That was the commitment. Walking to the North Pole, you go every step away from the safety of land into the middle of a frozen sea. So every step is away from safety. And after 642 nautical miles, disaster strikes. The entire ocean melts beneath our feet. This had never happened in recorded Arctic history. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. That now, 30 years on from this, you can no longer walk to the North Pole. There is no ice. And we managed, with a huge struggle, to make it through this breaking ice cap. Last few miles to the pole, we got a bit of luck. The wind changed direction. It gave us a platform to stand at 90 degrees north. We had achieved this mission. And yes, I became the first person to walk to both poles, but I wouldn't have done it on my own. And we flew what I think is still an important flag on our planet. Went back home and was hauled in by our patron, the great Jacques Cousteau from France. He'd helped me, and he gave me 30 years ago a 50-year mission. He said, Rob, you've got to make sure that Antarctica, the only place in the world that we all own, that we leave it alone as a natural reserve land for science and peace. And we've been working on that mission now for 30 long years. I believe we should leave one place alone on Earth forever, for science and for peace. We've been on it. We've done it in 2 ways. One is to involve young people, because after all, they'll be voting in the year 2041. We've been south now with over nearly 4,000 people from 83 different nations. And I'm proud to say, and you'll hear why, that we've involved a lot of young people, businesswomen, businessmen from India. And India is such an important country, A, for our survival on the planet, but B, in 20 years, I'm hoping that India will play a very positive role in the preservation of Antarctica. What we see there is terribly frightening. More and more ice breaking off Antarctica. And I decided that I should go and visit India. Well, let me rephrase that. MR, my great friend, he said, Rob, you've got to go to India. And I said, okay, I'll go. And we decided together that to be relevant in India, I should go around India on a bicycle. Let me tell you, that this was the hardest thing I'll never do again, and possibly one of the more dangerous things to go around India on my own on a bicycle. But it was very relevant to young people at colleges, schools, and universities. I'm very proud of this picture on my way around India on my bike. And as we went round India, we started the second part of our mission, which was, we need to inspire young people, but we also need to inspire the use of clean, renewable energy around the world. Because guess what? If we're using more clean, renewable energy, no one's going to go and exploit Antarctica, and possibly one will be able to breathe slightly easier in India. Let me just tell you something. After bicycling around India for 3 years, 6,000 miles, my lungs have only just recovered, and that's something I did about 6 years ago. So we need to improve the air quality. And as I went round India, I came across some of the most extraordinary garbage and rubbish dumps I've ever seen. This one's just outside Bombay. It happens to have the privilege of being the biggest waste dump on the planet. And there I met some extraordinary women. Ladies and gentlemen, I was so proud of these women. They were going into the dumps in Bombay and pulling out various things and then recycling them. And I followed that journey on my bike round India, and eventually I was able to deliver some desks to young people who'd never had desks before in the middle, all made of recycled plastic bottles. Very proud of that. Went up to the high into the Himalayas. I saw the source of the Ganges River at Gomukh there. That glacier's melting, only provides 450 million people with water. And going up there, not only was it a very holy place, it really made me think about, even in India, we need to be thinking about the Himalayas actually melting, and working with a fantastic team at the Global Himalayan Expedition Team. We've gone up, built an education station only running on renewable energy in Ladakh, showing young people how renewable energy can work properly. We go up into the Himalayas every year and give monasteries and villages electric light for the first time. We really, really try hard to be positive and show that solutions can actually happen. And this young man had to do his homework after 6 o'clock at night because we gave him a solar light. And every year, Antarctica is melting more and more and more. More ice goes into the ocean, up comes the sea level. And working with my son Barney, a great friend of MR, and his daughter Zena, it's just great stuff to have families working together. And my son convinced me that this ocean rise may not matter to us so much in the West, where we can build walls. It matters a hell of a lot to people who can't build walls. So together, we're trying to preserve Antarctica, and Barney's got his mission to inspire young people on solutions. We can't just be angry about the state of our planet. We've got to effect solutions. So together, my son and I would make a journey only surviving on renewable energy to the South Pole, using NASA technology to melt ice and snow, this time led by incredible women, Johanna and Katinka from Norway and Sweden. And off Barney and I went, incredible stuff. And I got 97 miles from the South Pole, fell over, dislocated my hip, which meant I was out. Barney would carry on, incredible effort by him. And ladies and gentlemen, imagine the disappointment at my age, especially, to not reach the South Pole when I thought I could. But I've had a brand new hip put back in, and at the end of this year, my son Barney and I will go back on our undaunted journey to the South Pole and finish that mission. Just before that, this November, we're taking more young people, lots of people coming from India, lots of business people coming from India. Please join us back to Antarctica on our ship. So my message is pretty simple, ladies and gentlemen. In order to make any change in life, one must have commitment and one must deliver on one's word. And I hope in our own very small way, we've tried to show that. And I believe these words I think they're very important. You know, it's not somebody else's problem, it's ours. And I just want to thank MR so much for his terrific support of me. And as I say, I've never really been the same ever since going around India on the bicycle. And I want to thank you and wish you all the very, very best of luck with your wonderful get together for India today. This is Rob Swan, going clear.
Wow. What an amazing, inspiring keynote. I hope all of you will share that keynote, which will be available on our YouTube channel as well. And that was something we had Rob record for us to be an inspirational piece, not just for this climate summit, but for the future as well. So Rob, I have to embarrass you a little bit as well. I know you did all these things in India, but you've done so much more also for my family. I know my daughter Xenia, you spotted her when she was in high school, and you took her, encouraged her, and took her to Antarctica on the trip. And she was then inspired to really work on marine biology and climate science, and has really taken on with Barney the role of being the next generation to actually help the world and solve these problems. So thank you for inspiring my daughter and my family as well.
Well, thanks, Emma.
And now we got a special guest. I know you're taking another leadership group this November, and we have someone, a PhD student, Deepika, who was inspired by you to apply and get selected to go with you in November. So we have Deepika here. So let's welcome Deepika, who's now studying in Germany, finishing up her PhD, and she'll be joining you in November. So we brought her on, and she might not want to ask you some questions, Rob, before she decides to go.
What a wonderful surprise. Hi, Deepika. I can't actually see you yet, but welcome. And hi there, how are you doing?
Thank you, I'm doing good. How are you?
Very well indeed, nice to see you. And I'm really looking forward to November. And fire away with any questions you might have.
Yeah, like I have one question, which I've been also getting from a lot of people asking about how this expedition is carbon neutral, because that's how we are promoting the expedition. So it would be nice if you could just give a highlight to all the people attending today.
Well, I think it's actually a big issue, and you have to learn to overcome this issue. That people will often say, if you want to save Antarctica, why go there? And that's a good point. But I believe that if all of us who are privileged to go and lucky to go, if we come back with that passion to preserve it, it's worth us going. As far as our carbon footprint, approximately it's about 10 tons per person to go there. That's an awful lot. That's 7 families average in India. So what we do as a team is to make sure that we plant more trees through my son Barney and his tropical regeneration work. He's replanting some 600 acres of rainforest in northern Queensland in Australia. So through him, we plant a lot of trees, but also we ask each person who comes that they must actually clean up. I don't like the word offset. I like the word clean up. I think if you make a mess, you should clean it up. So we ask each team member to come up with some really good ways of cleaning up their carbon footprint for doing this, and hopefully be able to share some of the ways they've done that to give other people, their peers, friends and family, ideas of what they can do as well. So it's a huge issue and we're on it.
Thank you, Rob. That was an elaborative answer. Yeah, I have one more question for you. It's regarding one of the things that you said in one of your interviews. You said young people don't want any more information, they want inspiration. So I could relate to this phrase of yours, but like, would you also like to elaborate upon it for the young people who have attended us here today?
Well, I think it's my generation, which is incredibly old, we didn't have, any of this input from everywhere, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all this stuff that piles in to a young person's head now. I don't know how you actually deal with it, really. Add to that that a lot of people have been on Zoom for the last year. I'm surprised that actually you're all sane. So my view on this is that, yes, we need information, but what we really need are solutions and inspiration. People need to know what they can actually do, not the problem so much, because I think we're all aware of the problem. But I think it's terribly important for people like myself and MR and a lot of people listening to provide you with solutions, because young people today have every right to be really angry with the world that my generation has left you. I'm really sorry, we're trying our best, but you have every right to be angry, Deepika. But being angry isn't enough. It doesn't get you anywhere. So we've got to take that passion amongst young people and turn that into solutions. And the only way to do that is through people like yourself. They possibly, your generation won't listen to me, but they will listen to you. So that's the purpose of you coming with us to Antarctica, to come back with a fantastic story and inspire your peers, your generation on solutions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Deepika, so much. Again, please, ladies and gentlemen, check out Deepika's blog. We posted that on the chat box. Also, Rob, before I let you go, some feedback from the listeners. Excellent, appreciate your presentation. Thanks from Bangladesh. That's Uday from Ajoy from Bangladesh. We also have Smita that says, what an amazing, inspiring presentation. And you have a lot of kudos, a lot of inspired people here in the audience, Rob. Once again, you're a true friend, and thank you so much for caring about not just the world, but also about India in particular. And we hope that you and I can both, when it's safe, go back to India as well.
Let's get there soon, MR, and thank you so much. And anybody who's listening, good luck to you all. Stay safe, and let's send a thought to a lot of people battling in India now. So take care, everybody. Be safe. Deepika, see you in Antarctica. Good luck.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Rob. What a wonderful, inspiring presentation and a call to action. And on that front, we're now going to move on to our next fireside chat here between two amazing people that I've known for many years. One person deals with biodiversity and all the issues relating to climate change in India, has done yeoman work in India for decades. And he, again, got a big gift very recently from another dear friend who committed 50 crores, which is a little over $6.5 million to his organization. So I won't steal any more of Dr. Kamal Bawa's thunder and Rohini Nilekani's thunder, but I want to introduce both of them here to take on and talk about what's happening at ATREE, what this big generous gift from benefactor Rohini means to this organization, as to how we move forward. And I want to welcome both Kamal and Rohini to the show. I hope both of you are staying safe wherever you are. But as we said earlier, even though India is going through such a ravaged crisis, the next crisis is upon the entire world, which is climate change, this existential threat. I leave it to two of you to inspire us and talk about your collaboration. Kamal and Rohini, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, MR. And a very good evening to you, Rohini. And
thank you, Dr. Bawa. Hope you are well.
Thanks. And it's great. I think this is a session of hope and inspiration. And so we hope we will continue this theme. And so Rohini, you have a very large portfolio, and that is Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies have a very large portfolio of environmental grants. And we at ATREE certainly very much appreciate your recent 50 crore pledge to support our environmental work. And I want you to tell us what motivates you to devote so much time and resources to the environment. I know you believe in other causes too, and you're supporting those, but I think it's particularly nice to see this focus on environment. And I was wondering if you could tell us what inspires you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Bawa. And in fact, as one of my mentors, you helped me to come to this conclusion that my environmental portfolio was perhaps the most critical as I look forward into the future, because I think certainly the people gathered in this audience know very well. And sometimes you only talk to the converted, but more and more people are beginning to understand that the economy, which drives so many of us and certainly drives many governments, is only a subset of the ecology, right? That is very clearly understood, that if you are going to build a development model that drains away your natural capital, you're really looking at a very bleak future. So on one side, there's my strategic imperative sort of thinking, that environmental issues, especially when combined with climate change related existence, are really very important to look at on a long-term basis. But apart from that, just my increasing love for nature itself and my increasing desire, especially to get younger people involved with understanding how interconnected we all are in the web of life and in nature, and what a joyful journey of discovery that can be, and how that journey of discovery can lead you to understand so many things and yourself change in the process, so that your earlier ideas perhaps of what is abundance begin to change, material abundance begin to change. And so for me, for both the personal dimension, the moral dimension, and the strategic dimension, my environmental portfolio, including of course ATREE, which thanks to you I've been involved in for so many years now, is not only very important, but also very joyful for me.
Well, thanks. And I think your support to ATREE, and for those of you who really don't know much about ATREE, ATREE works in 3 primary areas: biodiversity, water, and climate change. And I think your gift is going to allow us to strengthen our programs in several ways. One, of course, is generating knowledge to address our pressing environmental issues, including climate change, and I'll come to that in a minute. Second, this knowledge in turn will feed into policy design. As you know, we have recently started a new Center for Policy Research and Design. And thirdly, this knowledge will be applied to transform action on the ground, as we have been doing for quite a few years, or I would say decades, a couple of decades, with the local community. Through another new center that we started 2 years ago, Center for Socio-Environmental Innovation, that you again so generously funded. And finally, of course, as you know, we are building India's human resources to tackle important environmental issues. We have a world-class doctorate program, interdisciplinary doctorate program in conservation and sustainability studies. And I think the support will help us really strengthen that program considerably. I should also mention to others that Rohini's pledge also includes a matching grant, and we hope we will be able to meet that challenge of matching grant. But I think
Dr.
more
Bawa,
importantly,
if I were to, Dr. Bawa, if you were to tell our audience that since there's a matching grant out there, why should people try to match my challenge grant? Why should people invest in ATREE? Do you want to say that in just a few words?
Well, certainly. I think first and foremost, I think any contribution to ATREE will be doubled by your matching grant. Secondly, I think it's most important that the important issues we are addressing in terms of the water, biodiversity, and climate change, And I must say, I think there are very, very few institutions that are addressing these problems that clearly demonstrate the linkage among these issues. I think we have to realize, I'm sure we are realizing, as a matter of fact, due to the pandemic, most notably, that many of our problems arise because we have disrupted our interaction with the nature, with the natural world. And climate change is going to compound many of these problems. So if we don't invest in these issues now, few years from now, it will be much more expensive. So I can go on and on, but I think one of the things we want to do is we want to engage public more widely in some of the things we are doing. And I think, Rohini, you are very keen on public engagement. And I was wondering, if you would like to share with us your views, how we can engage public in the efforts towards the environment.
Yeah, I really think that, as you know, Dr. Bawa, I've always believed that in the continuum of Samaj, Bazaar, and Sarkar, which is society, state, and markets, that I believe that we have to really strengthen the Samaj or the society part of things. Because when you have a strong, healthy society, diverse society, but with good institutions such as ATREE and good leadership, in fact, such as you provide also, if we have many such institutions, we are much more likely to build resilience into into society, and to make people much participate and develop agency to solve local problems in context. And I think with the climate change challenges, especially, that becomes very important to build the societal muscle to solve their local problems in context. Of course, there is the state to look at the larger picture, and we must hold the state accountable to helping resolve those larger complex problems. And so also markets, we need them to stop creating so many negative externalities which have a huge societal cost. So for that, to have a strong society that can challenge both state and markets, I think it is very important that citizens begin to understand that these, especially climate change related problems, are going to impact us globally, but also impact us not just locally, but very, very personally. And so if we get more people to see this and participate in however small a way they can, I think over time that is going to build up in a shift in the mental model about what we mean by development. So for me, a lot of my work is focused on involving people, especially young people, as citizens to come together to solve their own problems. And that's why some of the work at ATREE interests me, because you're looking at nature-based solutions, you're looking at conservation-based livelihoods, and that involves wide grassroots participation in creating positive change. So that's what I like to focus on. I mean, we have, as a country, done our nationally determined contribution at Paris, and especially the NDC 3 on sequestration, right? Carbon sequestration. We have a long way to go. And I think some of ATREE's solutions, including the project I love on lantana, where invasive species such as lantana, which have overtaken India's southern forests, ATREE helps the local people living in and around those forests to harvest that lantana and then to sequester it as furniture and some really beautiful other kinds of things that are made with that lantana. And so there's a lot of creativity there when you involve a lot of local people and help them to innovate their way out of problems. So that's what I like to focus on.
Well, that's great. And I think our focus is also going to be increasingly towards public engagement. And I think one of the really big ambitious project which is going to allow us to do that is the National Mission on biodiversity and human well-being, which is all about how we sort of mainstream biodiversity in the economic development process, and how we really demonstrate the efficacy of these nature-based solutions. And I think the nature-based solutions with respect to climate change, I think you mentioned sequestration. Yes. I think it is just so critical. I think it's not only, it has a huge potential in terms of sequestering carbon, but it is also one of the least expensive ways to sequester carbon, but more importantly, restoration of our land and soils, restoration of a forest, restoration of our agricultural systems, agrobiodiversity. Yes. They have tremendous co-benefits. People will benefit. In fact, one of the goals of the mission is that every citizen of India will be able to participate and contribute to not only conservation of biodiversity, but also benefit socially, economically. And let me ask you just one more question. I know we have to let the program continue. How do you think in diaspora here can contribute to this process? What are your suggestions to become more involved in this sort of in a very holistic way to deal with the environmental issues, which have very, very clearly tremendous social and economic benefits. And it also addresses the issues of justice and equity.
Yeah. Before I start and before this goes away, let me just show you. ATREE worked with the Shola Trust and the elephant family to take lantana, which is an invasive species of wood, and use the wood of lantana to create these marvelous life-size, lifelike elephants based on real animals in the jungle. And I have 2 of them right here in my garden, and they occupy pride of place. So the point I'm trying to make is that by supporting such things, the diaspora, we really ask the diaspora to support India in all its development issues and challenges, especially because I'm telling you, in India, we are innovating and we are looking to create impact at scale through innovation, through collaboration, to creating digital public goods, and really many exciting things in the environment sector and everything else. But if the diaspora people have so much talent and resources, if you could join our hands with us, if we don't get India right, Dr. Bawa, I'm sure you'll agree, if we cannot get India right, I really don't see how we can get the world right, whether it is in public health issues, whether it is in ecological, biodiversity conservation issues, or it is anything else. Because we are soon going to be 1/5 of the world's population. We are getting there, and we matter. And getting India right in terms of justice, equity, and environment is going to be hugely important, of course, for India first, but also for the whole world. So all of you, half of your hearts are in India, I think. So reaching out, helping organizations like ATREE, and there are so many other great organizations in India. So I think the diaspora plays a critical role in supporting innovation, impact, and scale in India. So this is kind of an appeal. MR does this very well. Indiaspora does this very well. But I really do believe it's not just about your love for India, but everybody needs to help get India right. And we are on the way. We need some help. So that's why I think the diaspora is important.
Well, thank you very much, Rohini, and over to you, MR. And thank you again, MR, for your work. We very much appreciate it. And one last point to the young people, MR mentioned, and I'm going to compete here with Robert. ATREE also has very good centers in the Himalaya and Western Ghats. Come and please work with us. Get in touch with us, and you will have unbelievable experience. Thank you.
Agreed.
MR.
Thank you. Thank you, MR. Thank you, Sanjeev. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste, Dr. Bawa and Rohini. Thank you so much for this inspiring and eloquent call to action. So delighted that you could join us today. And what a great example of strategic philanthropy and environmental advocacy. I think both of you are exactly right when you say that all three pillars have to be involved: the markets, the state, as well as nonprofits and society. So glad that we are able to do this on Zoom. I mean, I know that there's Zoom fatigue and so forth, but there's also tremendous advantages that at a time when COVID is posing so many serious problems, that we are able to still get together and have this discussion on Zoom. We are now at the point of the program where we will get into the breakout sessions. And this is the point where we actively invite all our participants to engage and to discuss. But before I get to that and talking about the breakout sessions themselves, let me just tell you a little bit about what's at the other end. So we will have breakout sessions of about 20 minutes, after which, and there's 3 of them, after which we will reconvene in the main room, and all of these logistics will be taken care of by my colleagues. We are going to reconvene in the main room after 20 minutes, after which we have an exciting agenda still left to come. So we will have a summary of the breakout sessions, following which we are going to have a panel discussion on India Tomorrow, Perspectives from Climate Philanthropy. After that, there's going to be a talk from Arjun Divecha, who is the founder director of the Divecha Center for Climate Change, about driving institutional change for climate action. And we'll cap it all off with a performance by the Grammy Award winner, Ricky Cage, who is also an environmentalist. So stay tuned at the other end of the breakout sessions as well. But for the breakout sessions themselves, there are 3 of them, and you can select any of them that you wish. And again, this is a time for active participation. One of them is on biodiversity and livelihoods, which is going to be chaired by Anita Schwartz, who is the India Development Director of the Nature Conservancy. There's another one on business and climate change, which will be chaired by the Chief India Officer Hisham Mundal at the Environment Defense Fund. And lastly, there's counting the cost of air pollution, which will be chaired by Jane Burston, who is at the Clean Air Fund. She's the executive director there. So my colleagues will now start the breakout rooms, and you can select any of them. Some of my colleagues will be behind in the main rooms. If any of you have any specific questions, there are no discussions going on in the main room. So we really encourage you to join the breakout sessions now and reconvene in about 20 minutes. Thank you all.
Sanjeev, once again, how do you leave the breakout?
You can scroll down. You can scroll down on the box that's on your screens right now. And as you scroll down, you will see 3 breakout rooms. You are invited to join any of them.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And now we'll listen to some music in the main room.
It's a musical expression of my journey towards the light. It is everyone's journey. We are all looking for that light. We call it love, we call it peace, we call it happiness, we call it success, but we are searching for something beyond. And that state of beyond is what I call Shivoham. And that's why the album is called Shivoham The Quest. We will start a conversation exploring our own journey towards the light. In fact, I dedicate the whole album to seekers of the light everywhere and to the teachers that guide their path. I brought together not just the ancient verses in Sanskrit, but the Indian ragas with Gregorian chants, with sort of almost cafe French music, with a sort of an old English folk with the King's Singers, or with the Soweto Gospel Choir. But what you find is that there's so many commonalities across the messages between all these different cultures. All of us are seekers in some way, shape or form. Be the change you wish to see in the world. And this is our chance to be that radiant symbol of light ourselves. 3 movements 12 songs. Here's 90 minutes of music. Go on this journey with me. Let's all find Shivoham.
शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Hello, everyone. This is M.R. Rangaswamy again. Welcome back from the breakout sessions. I hope all of you had some good conversations around the three topics that we were discussing at the sessions. And now what I'd like to do is to call upon the panel, and maybe when the panel gets started, initially we can discuss some of the output and the reaction that people had from the different panel groups that met and did that. So maybe Anita Schwartz with TNC, do you want to just share some reactions from your breakout session as well?
Absolutely. Thank you, MR. So glad to see you. I'm glad to be with you today. So we had a good discussion. We had a couple of nonprofit partners there. ATREE was there and Sego Foundation. And so we had a great discussion. A couple of things came up. Overall inspiration for India's climate leadership. The goals that they've set forward as part of the international treaties are super impressive. And so there's a lot to inspire and a lot that can help India be a global leader. We spoke about some specific things in terms of looking at sustainable agriculture and all that can be done, regenerative agriculture, working with people to create jobs in India in the field of agriculture that improves their livelihoods, creates carbon sinks, and is overall very good for India. We talked about how some of the old-fashioned concepts for working in India no longer apply, and how we have to be really on top of our monitoring and evaluation programs so that we know what we can do better, not just as individual organizations, but working together, and also so the philanthropists who support us know that they're getting a really good investment. We talked about the responsibility of corporations to step up. MR, you're well familiar with Chennai. There are a lot big IT sector in Chennai. We've enjoyed support from some of them, but it's a good place. One of our attendees specifically pointed to Chennai tech sector as a place where we really do need to be seeing some more support as that community is in need, but also tries to transform. We also talk about how tree planting drives in India are really important. They're fun, they're good for the environment, but they also need to be monitored so that we're planting native species and putting in some maintenance costs so that we're able to keep those trees alive. No point doing a tree planting drive if the trees don't live.
Great. Thank you so much. That was Anita Nagpal Schwartz with the Nature Conservancy. Now, my old friend here, Jane Burston with the Clean Air Fund. Haven't seen you in a while, but great to see you on Zoom. What were the conversations like around air pollution in your breakout session?
Well, thanks, Emma. Lovely to see you too, and thanks for inviting me. And we had a really great discussion about air pollution. And initially, it's obviously the health impact of it. It's the cause of 18% of the deaths every year in India. And a number of people on the call have had personal experience of that, especially living in cities, how it comes from vehicles. But also experienced recently of how, given COVID, pollution can genuinely be reduced overnight. So the inspiration that has given to people about how quickly it can be tackled if we really put our minds to it. I think the second of 3 points that we talked about was the crossover with climate change, given the topic of this conference. and both how, because the sources of air pollution and climate change are often the same, things like vehicles or burning fossil fuels. So can the solutions be? And had a rich discussion about solar, both about solar as a solution to a different source of energy as a solution to reducing fossil fuels, but also interestingly the circularity of it, because if air pollution stays bad and India invests significantly in solar as it is doing, I think many people aren't aware that pollution actually reduces the output that you get from solar panels. And somebody raised a very interesting point about how renewable energy like solar is off the grid. So in a climate emergency with many more extreme weather events, it's much more resilient for communities than other sources of fuel that rely on the grid. And then finally, we talked about the economic impact of air pollution on the back of a report that the Confederation of Indian Industry and Dalberg Advisors released this morning, showing that there's a staggering $95 billion a year cost to business of air pollution, which is 3% of India's GDP. So a huge cost there because of the health impacts to businesses. And I would highly recommend that people read that very, very inspiring report.
Great. Thank you, Jane. And now finally to Hisham Mundol. Hisham, how was your session?
Thanks, Emma. No, it was a wonderful session. It was on business and the role of business. And I think there were 2 or 3 main takeouts for me. There is progress happening and it is encouraging on moving from businesses thinking about sustainability as a matter of compliance or sustainability as a matter of compassion, and thinking of sustainability instead as a driver of superior business performance. And as more and more businesses get to that place, that becomes self-fulfilling, right? Because more business performance means more profits, means more investments, which means more sustainability. So that's great. An interesting analogy was brought out saying it's quite likely that one of the things that the business world needs is community building of like-minded organizations might otherwise be competing in the marketplace, but on sustainability, they're all on the same journey at the same place. So places where they can learn and be inspired by each other. That was one part of the conversation. Another part, we spent a lot of time talking about technology and what it would take to catalyze climate technology much more. And we looked at the analogy of fintech and how that had exploded, quite frankly, in India, and how the conditions were right in terms of the tech infrastructure and talent and the entrepreneurial backbone. And we also spoke about the potential on AI, and that was, we left it as a bit of unfinished business, because there is a huge role of AI on, for example, deciphering the formula for climate smart agriculture. And so to all the Indiaspora tech entrepreneurs, there's a need for your hearts and your brains. I'll pass it back to you now.
Thank you so much. Again, we heard from Anita Schwartz with the Nature Conservancy, Jane Burston with the Clean Air Fund, and Hisham Mundol with Environmental Defense Fund. And now I want to invite the moderator for this panel moving forward is Shloka Nath. Shloka is the acting director with the India Climate Collaborative. And so I'm going to let the 4 of you have your discussion on climate philanthropy, and we'll see you back at the end of your session. Over to you, Shloka.
Thanks so much, MR. I can see already this is another success, much like last year, of course. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the second session of Indiaspora's Climate Summit, India Tomorrow, Perspectives from Climate Philanthropy. Thank you to all of the wonderful speakers before this panel for setting such an engaging tone for this evening. And of course, thank you to all of you, our audience members, for being here with us today. For those of you that may not know the India Climate Collaborative, or the ICC as we like to call ourselves, it's actually a first of its kind, India-led, India-focused collective of business and philanthropy that works to accelerate climate action in the country. And we really aim to represent a diversity of voices in the climate ecosystem. We work across sectors to implement scalable solutions, and we strive to increase funding to climate solutions in India. So philanthropic capital, as we all know, is limited. Philanthropic spending on climate, especially in a country like India, which prioritizes developmental needs like healthcare and education, is very, very small. The climate crisis, on the other hand, is massive. It's operating at a scale that was difficult to comprehend before the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, philanthropy is one of our key weapons in the fight against a warming world. And we have spent over a year since the official launch of the ICC in building collaboration amongst India's philanthropic sector. We've really worked to increase philanthropic engagement with the need for climate action. And our focus has been on growing India's domestic philanthropies to become champions for the climate cause. Yet the ICC itself would be incomplete without the unwavering support of international philanthropies across the world. Many of their India programs chaired by diaspora, just like yourself, committed to furthering the development of their country, even from miles away. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to introduce you to our wonderful panel for this evening, all of whom have been close advisors and supporters of the ICC and have been instrumental in helping build India's climate movement through funding, through capacity building, and of course, through their tremendous vision and grit. I know with them already, so I'm not going to do an extensive introduction, but just to sort of recap, Hisham Mandol is the chief advisor to the newly formed India branch of the Environmental Defense Fund, one of the world's leading environmental organizations that uses science, advocacy, economics, and partnerships to bring about impactful solutions and lasting change. Jane Burston is the executive director and founder of the Clean Air Fund, a global philanthropic initiative to tackle air pollution with a special focus on the Indian region. Anita Nagpal Schwartz heads the Nature Conservancy's philanthropic efforts for India and the US and the UK. TNC, of course, is a global nonprofit dedicated to conserving the planet's natural resources. Our last panelist, Siddharthan Balasubramaniam, Senior Advisor of Strategy at Climate Works Foundation, unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight due to a personal emergency, but Sid has been an incredible source of support for the Indian climate movement, and we will miss him tonight. So with that, I'm going to pass our mic on to our panelists for the evening. And Anita, I'm actually going to open up with you. My first question for you is, why is philanthropic capital so well suited to tackling the climate crisis? And why is it especially relevant for India?
Shloka, thank you. Do I have about 5 minutes on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's so nice to see you on camera today. As you know, our organizations have worked together, but you and I have not personally connected. So it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for asking a great question. And yes, philanthropic capital is essential to carrying out climate goals in India, to meeting our climate goals in India. Organizations like the Nature Conservancy have set carbon reduction goals. In our case, we have a goal of reducing carbon by 3 gigatons per year through sequestration and reduced emissions. Over 10 years, that's equivalent to removing 650 million cars from the road. So it's going to require, it's important, and it's going to require philanthropic support. And it is actually essential that we succeed. As we know, a climate crisis is a people crisis too. We're looking at fundamental issues of survival, clean air, access to water, and food demands. We know that food demands are going to increase in India by 50% by 2030. Energy demands expected to go up by 175%, and water demands expected to go up by 50%. These are all related to climate. So let's look at how philanthropy is making a difference. Just last week, we got a large grant. We were so thankful. It's a corporate grant that's going to allow us to work on a water project, Water for Nature and People near Pune, India. We're now going to launch a project for the Gode River restoration. And there are about 4.5 million people who rely on that river as their main water source. So a grant that can impact 4.5 million people is a huge return on investment at any size. On food security, with philanthropic investments from Tata Trust, Shloka, where I know you've had a good experience, we're looking at fundamentally addressing agricultural practices in Punjab and Haryana and making those practices far more sustainable. I know Jane knows quite a bit about this as well, but we're working to phase out the crop residue burning there. that's taking place and sending, impacting the farmers' health there, but also sending really bad air to Delhi in the winter time. And we're working there with 250,000 farmers. And with the sustainable practices that we're putting in place, their incomes can also go up. So huge return on investment. Choosing renewable energy, great way to impact India's air quality and reduce climate emissions. We've worked on a tool called SiteRight. And our work on that has been supported through private philanthropy, foundation funding. And this tool helps planners figure out where they can put in place large wind and solar projects without disrupting forests or tribal communities. This allows business to go ahead. Clean, green business in India creates jobs, helps address the climate crisis. And my last example, and probably our best one, with philanthropic funding, we provided a set of recommendations to the Indian government at their request. They were looking for information on how to allocate tax dollars to support climate goals. So now substantial funds are going to be sent to states that have extensive green cover. And the amount sent is going to be based on their green cover. This motivates states to keep their forests and to create new ones. And it helps India meet its climate commitments. To give you an example of return on investment, we got this win when we were a $6 million program overall, the Nature Conservancy in India, $6 million program. The amount of return on investment is $66 billion. That's billion US dollars going to states with green cover. This is the world's largest fiscal transfer based on green cover and is an enormous win. And it will shape the way India proceeds going forward, a great way to help meet climate goals. All of this work happens through private philanthropy. And so I think, organizations like the Nature Conservancy, there are many others out there doing great work, can make a case that the philanthropy helps at every level. Thank you so much for letting me share that. And thank you to all the partners out there in India who make our work possible. We don't do this work alone.
Thank you, Anita. It's lovely to finally connect with you as well. Thank you for bringing home such a crucial point. It's often not about the amount of funding, but the strategic imperative behind that funding, because what philanthropic capital can be and what no other form of capital can be is actually incredibly catalytic. So thank you for that. I think your examples were fantastic, and I think they really brought home that point. Moving to Hisham now. Hisham, it's great to see you here again. How can philanthropy support India's transition to a net zero economy? And how can philanthropy play a really key role in the non-mitigation elements of the climate crisis? And so when I say non-mitigation, I mean adaptation, just transitions, things that are really not accounted for in this race to net zero.
Sure, thank you, and lovely to see you as well. And then thank you, Indiaspora, both the team as well as the members of the diaspora for caring about the issue and the country. So, Satya at the start of today's session spoke about net zero and his perspective, and I wanted to share a slightly nuanced view on this as well. There is a lot of talk around net zero, and there's a difference between achieving net zero, getting close to net zero, and making public commitments about net zero. And I think it's important to just kind of figure out what is the value or otherwise of a net zero commitment. A net zero commitment is fantastic as a battle cry. It's fantastic as a set of organizing principles that guides policy, resourcing, etc. But it is far more critical to think about the building blocks that would go into a net zero achievement and the milestones around it, rather than say net zero by X, Y, Z, and then we'll see you in 2040 or 2050. What are these kind of building blocks? It could be of a wide range of things. We could be thinking about how do we fundamentally reduce the cost of transition for an industrial plant? How do we get climate smart agriculture, the climate smart bit of agriculture to start kicking in? How do we bring in new science like green hydrogen, for example? How do we catalyze market forces of the kind that Anita spoke about a moment ago? milestones. Let's take the electric vehicle example, and if you look at it, we've made this national pledge that all cars in India are going to be, only electric cars sold by X date. Along the way, though, we need to be thinking about the share of electric vehicles to total sales. We need to be thinking about the number of states with electric vehicle incentives. We need to think about the volume of charging infrastructure. Those are the kind of things that are far more likely to get you to actual net zero than the commitment per se. I'm not dissing the commitment. I'm saying think about the building blocks and the organizing principles. What would the role of philanthropy be? So personally, I believe that philanthropic money is precious and needs to go to those areas. It needs to be used as funding what is unfundable, the tougher areas out there. What are these tougher areas? These are the ones which tend to be politically challenging or technically complicated or a mix of both. In that context, therefore, think about where in the broad spectrum of net zero emissions are really the hardest issues. There are hard to abate industries like cement and steel. Very little progress is being made on them. There are really hard questions that we are still not addressing. 500,000 jobs come from coal in India. Coal is not going to go away unless we think about what happens to 500,000 people in 3 states with 41 Lok Sabha MPs, and presumably multiplied by 5 number of family members. That's a real constituency that we have to think about. There are tough scientific questions which need philanthropic money. In the breakout group that we had, we were talking about how artificial intelligence and machine learning need to come into play to resolve or make progress on climate smart agriculture. There's also the opportunity for philanthropy to support what I call leapfrog technologies. As a country, we jump from no phones right over landlines into mobile, no bank branches, no banking. We went straight to mobile banking. Those are the kinds of technologies which will require the risk capital and the patient capital that only philanthropy can bring in. Just on the mitigation and adaptation point, India is interesting because we're so early on in our growth journey that adaptation and mitigation kind of tend to become intertwined. Half the buildings that we need are not yet built. If we have to meet our economic growth objectives, we're going to have to double steel and cement manufacture. So I wouldn't be so fussed about are we slotting it in adaptation or mitigation. But the point I'd make is come back to saying where can philanthropic money either be catalytic or leveraged. Catalytic in terms of creating new markets, like for example the LED bulb phenomenon that has exploded in India, or leveraging government spending. There's a lot of well-intentioned government spending that needs a little bit of support and guidance that can deliver disproportionately good results. I'll pause here.
Thanks, Hisham. I thought that was actually really well said, as always. And I love how you spoke about how philanthropy could support that transition, but you really broke down an incredibly complex issue into the building blocks of any big target, right? And those organizing principles, setting those shorter term milestones. And I got that you aren't dissing the commitment. Thank you for clarifying that as well. I think we do need to find a commitment, though, that walks the tightrope between supporting innovation and growth and actually being achievable. And I think your examples were really well sort of taken in that. And I'm sure we'll come back to this. But I'm going to move on to Jane now, because she also has an incredibly sort of interesting area of work, and one that is so relevant to what we're dealing with in India right now. If you can talk to us a little bit, Jane, about your experience at the Clean Air Fund, and in your opinion, how can learning from the air pollution sector really inform efforts to expedite funding to an engagement with other sectors within climate action in India?
Thanks, Shloka. Great to be part of this panel, and great question. I mean, I actually don't see action on air pollution and action on climate as two different things. I think that they're done well can be exactly the same thing. And it's actually one of the reasons why many funders that we see are coming to air pollution, or from air pollution are coming to climate, is the opportunity for wins on both health and reduction of greenhouse gases. I think what we've seen is that for some segments of the population, they really, well, lots of segments of the population really care about climate change, but it doesn't affect their decision making on a day-to-day basis. Even though they do genuinely have this concern, they don't tend to translate it into their everyday lives. Whereas with air pollution, because it impacts them and their families every day, it's something that seems a lot less remote, a lot more urgent, local and tangible often than the impacts of climate change. So there's huge different segments of the population who would understand broadly and be motivated to do something about air pollution that might not if we were talking solely in climate change terms. One of the interesting things that we saw at the beginning of the COVID pandemic is we funded a survey across many different countries globally about how much do people care about air pollution, and where does it rank in their list of environmental concerns, where does it list in their rank in their list of health concerns. And we were absolutely blown away that in India, I mean, obviously 94% of people think that air pollution could be improved in their local area. But what blew us away was that 86% of people said that they were concerned about air pollution as a health concern. And it was exactly the same percentage were concerned about infectious disease. And this was, you know, after the first couple of months of the pandemic, in a lot of other countries, we saw infectious disease coming a high first and air pollution a second. But the fact that they're on a par in India does speak volumes. I think the fact that there are wins available here on health is really heightened by what we've learned about the links between air quality and the respiratory diseases that air pollution causes and COVID itself. You know, people are even more aware than they were before of people that are vulnerable because of respiratory diseases that have either been caused by air pollution or are being exacerbated by air pollution. And so there's even more sensitivity to the topic, and not least because we've also at the same time in many areas with lockdown seen air pollution come right down, so people can see that it is a problem that can be tackled. I think one of the things that I find incredibly motivating for working on this is the benefit to children's health. For every single microgram that we can reduce, it does have a tangible impact on children's health and children's prospects and prosperity later in life. I'll come on to the kind of economic benefits to business in a minute, but I was struck recently reading a study that some Israeli economists have done, where they looked at just the short-term impact of air pollution on children on the day that they were taking their exams. And you know, correcting for all of the confounding factors, they found that children who were in schools that couldn't afford air purifiers on high air pollution days scored much worse in their exams than either children in schools that had air purifiers or children that took their exams on lower pollution days. And they calculated the impact that would have on their future earnings. And it was really significant, something like $30 a month for the rest of their lives lost because of their lower high school exam score. And that's just exposure on one single day, the kind of loss of concentration that you get when you're being poisoned by the air. So there's a huge equity issue here for the kids that are going to schools that can't afford the purifiers, and you know whose mothers have been exposed whilst pregnant. And then finally, I think one of the things that we're learning is that even though the health impacts are massive, and even though the co-benefits to climate change of tackling air pollution are incredibly significant, often pollution-related legislation or action kind of stops when it comes to tackling the Treasury or the Finance Ministry. And in terms of getting businesses involved, sometimes it's hard to push the private sector to voluntary action. So one of the things that we've really focused on funding is evidence of the economic benefit of tackling air pollution. And this report from Dalberg out this morning is an absolutely phenomenal example of that. I think India is leading in the world in this kind of analysis. 3% of GDP is a huge number. And I think as the government thinks about building back better, it will be very interesting evidence to take into account for how tackling air pollution can really support businesses, because I think often the narrative is development, economic development, an inevitable consequence of that is the pollution that we see. And actually for many industries, the exact opposite is true when we're looking at staff productivity and the impact on particular sectors like tourism. So I think in conclusion, the win-win-wins for health and climate and the economy is one of the main things that we've learned. And building on the points of the other two speakers, the opportunity for collaboration, not just across the NGO sector, but also with the health sector and with the private sector too, is huge.
Thanks, Jane. I think the report you've launched today is a seminal piece of work and is going to be an important one that's going to be referred to for a very, very long time to come. I think it just goes to the heart of the issue, which you've pointed out, of course, is the structural inequality behind climate change. And so if there was ever a sort of motive move in terms of building out solutions and interventions, it's just that it's going to speak to the heart of everything that we care about within the development sector as a whole, if we don't start dealing with climate change. Thank you for that, and congratulations on the report. I'm very excited to sort of see what comes from it. My next question actually is for all three of you, and I'm going to come back to you, Anita. I think it's a question that's common for all of you, but I'd love to hear from you first, Anita. What is TNC's plans and strategies to accelerate climate action in India in the near future? And I think if you could also elaborate a bit on what advice you might give new funders looking to invest in climate action in India. And Jane and Hisham, I'm going to come to you next. Same question for you. What are your organization's plans and strategies to focus on climate action in India in the near future? And what would be your advice to new funders? So we'll start with you, Anita.
Thank you, Shloka. It's a great question. And I've already touched some on our work, the Nature Conservancy's work on energy and policy, work that benefits people, work on water. And I want to say that some of our new projects benefit our furry friends. As India's climate changes, India's wildlife struggles. And so to help, we've got, there are a number of people working on tigers and elephants, and we've got our eye on the gorgeous Himalayan brown bear. There are about 500 of these bears left. And when their habitat changes, their behavior changes. And so they're coming closer to communities in Ladakh. And what we're looking to do is to collaborate with communities there to prevent some of the human and wildlife conflicts. We're training bear guardians, which to me sounds like a great job title, depending on the day. And with these bear guardians, they'll proactively look for ways for peaceful coexistence, whether that's fencing in corrals or barns, to keep the bears away from the livestock, or looking at waste management measures so that the waste does not attract the bears. There's a lot that we can do. And these paid guardians can have improved livelihoods. We'll be addressing the first immediate problem, which is this human-bear conflict, while we then turn our attention to larger landscape restoration plans that address climate change. And to funders looking to invest in India, I say, please do. I think that the Nature Conservancy and others can make the case that we're getting the return in India, that India is excited to do this work. And within that setting, we're able to do a lot, like that large ecological fiscal transfer that I referred to earlier of $66 billion. India is mission critical for the Nature Conservancy and for other NGOs. It's third largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions and holds 8% of the world's biodiversity in a single country. We must succeed overall for planetary health. And somebody said earlier today that we have half of our hearts in India. That is certainly true, very true. And when we look at the job that India has done protecting its biodiversity, they've done very well. This is an incredible legacy to protect. So if you're looking at issues of legacy in India, you gotta fund the nature. And then, Shloka, I want to echo one of the thoughts that you said, which is that conservation and environment really need to be elevated as a philanthropic priority, similar to health and education. In some ways, environment is a health cause. In many ways, it's a health cause. These are issues of human lives: clean water, clean air, food security. We can't survive otherwise. So really, these issues do need to come up for funders in a much larger way. And so thank you for that. I hope people will consider it.
Thanks, Anita. Hisham, I'm gonna pass it down to you. But thank you, Anita. That was very eloquently said.
Sure, thanks.
I want the bear job, by the way. Just saying.
You're in queue for that one. That's a very cool looking sounding job. And thanks, Anita, and thanks, Shloka. So EDF has been active in India for close to 10 years. We've not exactly maintained a high profile, but so that you might not have heard too much about this, but we support Mahindra and Mahindra's net zero commitment, for example. In the days when we used to travel on Indigo Airlines, you had an option of buying a carbon offset that was informed by us. We're doing work on climate smart agriculture in Bihar, and it's extending to Maharashtra, where we're trying, we'll be using a combination of digital platforms and micro-entrepreneurial models to help farmers, increase output, but also increase incomes and then have more climate sustainable agriculture practices. We're helping build out in India air quality center of excellence, because one big lever of change in India is going to be made in India solutions for Indian problems. Our vision is we see an India with a pathway to a shared, healthy, low carbon prosperity. And our ambition is to be a progressive partner to the country that combines fit for purpose technology, understands the market forces, really embeds in the political economy of the country, and works across a broad sector of stakeholders, businesses, corporates, communities. Everyone that matters is who we work with. We're setting up an India entity, and we're attempting to make it, have it as a made in India entity, solutions for Indians by Indians. And I'll be honest and say we're looking for supporters from the diaspora, so I would be happy to carry on this conversation. On advice to funders, this isn't so much about EDF, but in general, I have two things in my mind. One is just stay focused. Focus on any one or a limited set of areas that you're passionate about, and because of the potential it holds. The second is think of those ideas that can scale up. India can only move forward if we have ideas that have a runway to scale. Otherwise, we're just playing on the sidelines. In terms of supporting partners, look for partners that you're comfortable with at an individual level, but who also understand both the science and the politics of working in India and getting change done. And those are equally important. Thank you.
Thanks, Hisham. I love that. A really resounding set of ideas and a great call to action. And I think under your leadership, like EDF in India is going to do amazing things. And we're all here to support everyone on this panel. So you have a good team behind you as well. I'm still trying to figure out what that map behind you is off or from. I think it's been a year, but I haven't been able to place it yet. Jane, so you can let us know at some point. Jane, over to you. You have the final word. I wanted to hear from you about some of the plans that CAF has in store, in the near future, and of course, advice for new funders who are looking to invest in this space.
Absolutely. So as a philanthropic organisation dedicated to clean air, we are granting to a number of different organisations in India. We don't do the delivery on the ground ourselves, we make grants. And we make a huge variety of grants across a lot of different types of topic on supporting organisations to measure air pollution, so the data, and making sure that the campaigning groups or local authorities have access to the data that they need to do their work. Looking at the health impacts, working with business, and supporting pollution control boards, city governments, and the national government to really measure what they're looking to measure and develop policies on it. And our focus is in cities like New Delhi, Lucknow, Agra, really working at all tiers of government with the city, the state pollution control board, and the national government. And I think, one of the things that we have done, which I've found quite striking, is looking at the amount of philanthropic funding that's being spent on air pollution globally. For the last couple of years, we've done a report called State of Global Air Quality Funding, which does what it says on the tin. And there's a really very small amount of funding going to reducing air pollution in India. Last year it was, for 2019, which we reported last year, it was 13.8 million. And we know that the study doesn't necessarily capture all of the funding, and it obviously doesn't capture voluntary work because that isn't paid for, but that's tiny in comparison to the scale of the challenge. So I would say if you're thinking about investing on air quality, literally every dollar does make a difference. There's loads of really good organizations in India that are struggling for funding, and on a range of topics. Data, if you're a technical person; health impacts, if you want to work on research and the health side of things; local groups and community action. So whatever your interest, there is a group that wants to work on air quality within that. But the advice that I would give, I think, two things. One, Hisham already said this in his earlier comments, but look for leverage. One of the reasons that we've funded the Confederation of Indian Industry to set up this private sector CEO forum on air pollution is because there is a huge amount of potential, both in the CSR donation from Indian businesses, the 2% CSR donation, but also the action that they could voluntarily take. That would cost a huge amount were we to invest in it, and we would never have the funding to do that. But by bringing the CEOs together through the Confederation of Indian Industry, it really helps them kind of champion the cause, boost one another's incentive to do something through healthy competition, and share best practice for their own industry. So leverage for me is pretty key. I think the second piece of advice is there's a lot of ambition in India. The government has a very strong national clean air plan with very ambitious targets. There's lots of groups that really want change to happen. And so there's a huge opportunity to invest in those organizations that are putting their shoulder behind those targets and really attempting to achieve them, rather than the kind of challenge anti everything stuff that I think is sometimes appears to fund. So I would say, leverage and shoulder behind the targets.
Thanks, Jane. I think you really nicely tied in to some of what Hisham and Anita were referring to earlier as well, that we need a lot more ground level action. I think your point on AQ is well taken. There's a lot that we can do, which we haven't managed to do yet. A good example is, of course, the Environmental Pollution Prevention and Control Authority in India has been dissolved. The EPCA, the Commission for Air Quality Management, has also lapsed. So we don't really have a governing body for air quality in the country. And, we're looking at targets like net zero, and yet there are, of course, these sort of mechanisms at the central level that need to be built in, and at the state level that don't really exist. And so again, the work that you're doing is absolutely fantastic, but we do need to sort of work on really reforming a number of these sectors and making sure we ignite those crucial sectoral transitions and fill in those ecosystem gaps. So the work that all of you are doing is so crucial to putting India on that path to sustainable development. And I really thank you for that. I just want to wrap up here. I think that's all the time we'll have for tonight. So thank you to the organizers of Indiaspora for inviting us, for creating this platform to explore India's climate story. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for this evening. And as I said, for the work that you're all doing in this space and for sharing your insights with us tonight. And thank you, of course, to our audience for taking the time out to be with us here today. I think I'll just wrap up on this one note, which is climate change is not an isolated phenomenon. It impacts every single aspect of India's development, from healthcare to gender equity to urban planning. We need to bring a climate lens into all the work that we do, into all the funding we give or receive, and into our very perception of what the future holds for us. And building resilience is pivotal to securing the needs and rights of future generations. And that responsibility really just lies with us. It's in our hands. So we can use climate action to support India's development, to grow India's nascent green economy, to protect India's most vulnerable populations. And it's going to take all of us, all, whether you're in the country or outside of it, to come together and invest in the future of this nation. So thank you once again. I hope you've had a lovely day or night, as may be the case, and do take care of yourselves. Thank you so much, and over to you, MR.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shloka. That was a great way you articulated the summary. Once again, I want to thank Jane, Hisham, Anita, and yourself for taking the time. And for those of you, I know a couple of you are in India, please stay safe. Our prayers are with you. And I know the country's going through some really tough times. So stay safe, and let's continue the work on climate change as well, as all of you put it. Thank you so much. And now we move on to our final keynote of the day. It's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Arjun Divecha. Arjun is a founder circle member at Indiaspora, but he also really created the Divecha Center for Climate Change at the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. So I want to welcome, my good friend Arjun to make some remarks on what the center is doing and what his thoughts are on the climate change challenges in India. Welcome, Arjun.
Sure. Thanks very much, MR. I thought I'd spend a few minutes just telling you about the Divecha Center and about how, what is the mission and what do we actually do. Essentially, as MR mentioned, it is based at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. And it was founded about 10 or 12 years ago as a partnership between myself and my colleague, Jeremy Grantham, who is quite well known as in the environmental movement, who runs something called the Grantham Foundation for the Protection of the Environment. And essentially, we set up the center in cooperation with the Indian Institute of Science. So it is a department which kind of sits within the environmental studies, environmental sciences department in Bangalore. The mission, as I see it, is kind of a threefold mission. First of all, there's kind of research work that we do. Secondly, there's outreach and education. And thirdly, there's kind of relations with the government itself. So let me talk briefly about each of these three and kind of what are some of the things that we've done in each of these three areas. First, on the research front, as you can imagine, it's primarily a research institution. And so doing research, fundamental research into climate change. And as I see it, India has two very large issues having to do with climate change, apart from everything else. One is the impact of the monsoons. Obviously, with climate change, the monsoons get affected. And so therefore, there's a huge impact of that. And two is glacial melting. And again, pretty much all of North India's water comes from the Himalayas. And so to the extent that you have a problem with glacial melting, there's an issue with that. So we've done a lot of research in a lot of subjects, but these two are kind of specific areas of focus, in addition to black carbon and what are the impacts on things like that. In addition to doing research kind of on our own, we also have a lot of cooperation with the Grantham Institutes in England, which are located at the Imperial College in London and also at the London School of Economics. And so there's a lot of cooperation back and forth where there's projects which are done jointly and things like that. And just to give you an example of a small thing that we did, which really, I think, made a small but important difference. One of the professors at the Divecha Center is Professor Kulkarni, who is really one of the world's leading glaciologists. And he wrote a paper about 5 years ago about glacial melting, about, essentially these lakes that get formed when glaciers melt, because you have an ice plug at the end of the glacier. And when that ice plug melts, you could theoretically have a huge amount of water that, that floods. And we saw that very recently, as I'm sure most of you are familiar. Anyway, so he wrote a paper about this, about the South Lona Glacier in Sikkim, and estimated the amount of water that was backed up. And as he said, described to me that within a week, he got a call from the chief minister of Sikkim saying kind of, hey, what can we do about this? And so the center then put together a small project to figure out how can we mitigate this issue, and came up with a very, very simple solution, which is to create a very large plastic tube which siphons the water out. And so for the last 5 years, we've been siphoning the water out of that lake. So it's a small, small win in having an impact, hopefully, on human beings. So that's kind of on the research front. The second place that we do work is on the outreach. And we do a lot of education of the community. We have kind of an annual climate change quiz, which is attended by thousands of students all over India. We, in addition, have a lot of public seminars and classes and things like that. But most importantly, as I see it, what the center has been able to do is to essentially provide funding for over 20 graduate students in climate research. And so so we have a number of professors and a number of graduate students who are now getting PhDs in climate science. And so we think that's very, very important. The third area, and in my opinion, perhaps the most important, and this is one which, which is not obvious when you first think about it, but part of the reason to have a center at the Indian Institute of Science was essentially that at the end of the day, if you can't affect government policy, that is the most important thing that you can do. Because at the end of the day, to really make a difference to climate change, you have to affect government policy. And by being located at one of the premier research institutes, in the country, we have that access to the government. And so, for example, just about a month or two before the Paris Accords, Prime Minister Modi, in fact, invited the director of our center to spend a day with him in Delhi, kind of explaining to him, well, what do we see? And so we like to think we had some influence on India's, signing the Paris Accords and, educating things like that. And that has continued ever since then. In fact, with the new climate COP conference coming up later on this year, we are already in touch with the government in helping them kind of formulate India's policies towards that. So we like to think that, we serve all these three kind of areas: doing research, fundamental research on climate, outreach to the community to try and educate, and then thirdly, to kind of hopefully influence government policy. So that's essentially what we do, MR.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Arjun. This is good. I think today what we've talked about are three things, right? One, we wanted to inspire people. I think that was one of the things today with the Earth Day coming up. Second was to talk about collaboration between organizations. And the final thing is to look for individual action, like what you've taken and many others are taking in this space. So I think what at Indiaspora we've tried to do is to show our viewers all three elements. Hopefully people will take action by being inspired by folks like Rob Swan, people like Satya Tripathi and others, and Dr. Bawa are propagating institutions, and folks like you are funding institutions. And then, of course, we heard the eminent panel talk about how they're cooperating with the India Climate Cooperative, right, to bring about change. So I think all of us play a key part in this ecosystem. So do you have any words for people who are looking to invest in India around the climate problem today, Arjun? Because you're a money manager at the end of the day. So where would you allocate? If I had $100 to invest in India, where would I put that in the climate field?
Well, from an investing point of view, I would say that one of the things which has been most heartening really over the last few years especially is the shift within the investment landscape towards what is called ESG investing. And within ESG investing, I would say that most of the focus has been on climate change. And so increasingly companies are being forced by the marketplace to adopt policies that are, that are climate friendly. And we see that every single day now. We see more and more, like when we go to try and pitch to get new business from, from potential clients, the first question that they ask us typically is show us what is your ESG policy, what is your policy on investing in companies, from a climate change point of view. So I think that is making a profound difference in the corporate world. That basically you can no longer kind of be, kind of wave that off and saying, well, we focus on profits and, climate comes second. That's no longer the case. And this is true not just in India, this is true everywhere in the world. Believe it or not, there are companies in Russia which are involved with mining who are very, very, very much focused now because of this on cleaning up the environment, on cleaning up the air, on cleaning up things within, within their sphere. Even companies, located in deep Siberia, where there's really no population centers and things like that. But at the end of the day, they are now forced by market forces to, so I'm a big believer that, that market forces can be an extremely good good impact on climate change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Arjun, for joining us. And
Surely, thank you.
Keep up the great work at your center and keep us updated as well. All right.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me, Amar. Bye.
Thank you. Next up, I think we have our final inspiring moment of this summit. So we will have our friend Ricky Cage. Is Ricky here?
Yes, I am. I'm just turning on my video.
Great, no problem. Come on. I want to see your picture, Ricky, and ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, my video is on actually. I think, yeah. Now I'm on screen. Yeah,
great.
There I am.
Good evening to you, Ricky. It looks like you're sitting in your studio in Bengaluru.
Yes, I am. This is my writing room. This is where I do all my composing.
Do you have your bed somewhere there as well, close by?
I've got a sofa which is large enough to be a bed, which usually becomes my bed.
Fantastic. Great to have you. So tell me, before we play some inspirational music, video, and stuff like that from you, you're a Grammy Award winner. You've focused and dedicated your life to, taking action on climate change. You're such an inspiring force in the music world. What are you planning to do on Earth Day that's coming up? I know you guys are shut down, locked down. The country's going through a huge crisis. What do you plan to do on Earth Day in a couple of days?
So I've got a live performance with the Earth Day Network, which is happening on April 22nd. So that's going to be a pretty cool performance because sharing the stage is going to be Pope Francis, and we're going to have Secretary John Kerry and a bunch of other musicians. So that's going to be a really, really cool concert to be a part of.
And how do people know about that concert? Where do they go? Can you give us?
So they could just go to earthdaynetwork.org, and it's going to be live streamed over there.
Yeah, and we'll post that on our chat as well. So that's happening on Earth Day, and you're going to be performing there. So that's phenomenal. So in terms of where do you see India? You've heard this whole session for 2 hours this morning. You've seen, like I said, people inspiring us, people taking action. Where do you see India moving ahead with taking action on climate change from your vantage point?
So, I agreed with what everybody said. And, I'm not a person who actually does tremendous amount of work on ground. I'm more of a person who communicates messages and understands problems and communicates these issues. But one thing that I do understand about India in my own naive way is that, India is a very complicated country, and, there are problems which are considered to be survival problems, and there are problems which are considered to be thriving problems. And unfortunately, when it comes to climate change, it's always thought about as a thriving problem and not a survival problem in India. And that is what we're lacking in our communication, that we need to showcase to everyone that this is a survival problem, because people feel that there are more immediate problems which are survival problems, and unless we fix those problems, we cannot get to the thriving problem. So in my own naive way, this is what I feel, that, that the communication needs to be stronger in terms of climate change.
And what inspired you to kind of dedicate your, journey to climate change, having been a musician, a Grammy Award winner, making commercial music and all that stuff? When did you decide to do that, and what inspired you?
So when I started off my musical career about 20 years ago, I was doing a whole lot of commercials and I was quite successful doing that. I did, in a span of about 13 or 14 years, I did more than 3,500 commercials for pretty much every brand you can imagine and their competitor. So, and in every part of the world. And it sort of struck me after 13, 14 years of doing this, that these big brands have understood the power of music, so much so that they're ready to spend so much of money on me to create a piece of music for them to sell a product. And not only that, they're ready to spend a couple of $1 million to actually air this music to sell their product. So that is when I realized that when these big brands have understood the power of music, it's high time that I myself as a musician need to understand this power. And that is when I decided that I'm going to stop all forms of commercial music or Bollywood music or anything like that. And I'm only going to create music on social impact. And since I feel very strongly about the environment, and I consider myself to be a very strong environmentalist. So automatically, whenever I make music, it always veers towards being about the environment.
Fantastic. And you have a YouTube channel, so people can check out all your videos there. Plus, you also do live concerts. So set up the song we're going to play now for us.
So this song actually, I have to say, was completely inspired by Mr. Satya Tripathi. So he's been a mentor to me and been a very close friend of mine for a long time. And he told me when I performed at the World Environment Day in New Delhi, this was in 2018, for the government of India. So at that time, he approached me and he told me about this zero budget natural farming. That is the natural farming technique that is being followed in Andhra Pradesh, especially in Araku Valley, where currently there are 600. He must have explained all about it. It's a huge, huge movement. And so I visited Araku Valley, visited Guntur, visited parts of Andhra Pradesh, and I was so inspired by these amazing farmers, especially the tribal farmers, who they themselves are musicians and they've got these songs that have been passed down from generations. So I actually stayed there for a much longer time, thoroughly inspired by them, by their lifestyles, by how much they feel about sustainability. And then I created this song in collaboration with them. So this is basically the song that you're going to hear, me in collaboration with the tribal farmers of the natural farming technique.
Fantastic. So we'll see you after the song.
Hello everyone, Namaste from India. I'm Ricky Cage and it is a huge honor for me to perform for you today at the Indiaspora Climate Summit. A big shout out to M.R. Rangaswamy and his wonderful dedicated team at Indiaspora. Our song is a dedication to the farmers of India, especially the zero budget natural farmers of Andhra Pradesh. Now Satya Tripathi is with us today, who spearheaded this massive movement in India. Some of these tribal farmers are fantastic musicians and have songs that have been passed down for generations. So of course, I collaborated with them for this song. Also joining us are Mumfo Mukhaba from South Africa, Wari Jashri and Arun Kumar from India. Here is the One with Earth song.
Plant your dreams in the soil and water them with love. Living in harmony, it's only natural. What an amazing gift this is, to be conscious and choose to do what's right. Time to make it right. She's everything we need. What an amazing gift this is, to be conscious and choose to do what is right. We've got to stand for life. Together, see the moon, yeah. Time to make it right. Time to make it right. Time to make it right.
Wow. Ricky, what an inspiring and amazing and uplifting song. Thank you so much for that wonderful performance, and really appreciate your support of Indiaspora as well. And just a promotion, we'll see you back again tonight for the US Climate Summit, which all of you in India can wake up a little bit early tomorrow morning to watch, and we'll I hope you get some sleep and you join us tomorrow morning, Ricky.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity to showcase my music and my thoughts at your wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you.
So we'll see you in the second part tomorrow morning. So take it easy. And now I'd like to welcome back our Executive Director, Sanjeev Joshipura, to help me close out the first part of our Climate Summit. So Sanjeev, what did you think? You've been watching this unfold over the past 2 hours. Some of your thoughts?
Incredible event, Amar. When we were putting the agenda together with our team, I know we were all very optimistic about the event. We thought it was a great lineup, some excellent speakers, but frankly, I think the event even outdid my already pretty high expectations. And I'm so gratified that so many people chose to join us from India, from other parts of the world, some from here in America as well. A lot of substantive panels, a lot of substantive, concrete, actionable advice given by a lot of our panelists, who I think framed complex issues in a way that that was so inspiring.
No, that's terrific. But I want to give a special shout out to Mansi Patel. Hopefully we can embarrass her and bring her on screen. Can we spotlight Mansi, please? Because she was the person who pulled it off, this whole incredible event. Mansi, thank you so much.
Oh no, thank you. It was a team effort, so I feel like I have to give a nod to the rest of the team as well, who also helped with so much for this event.
Thank you, Mansi, and I think Sanjeev, like you said, the thing that amazed me as we pulled this whole program together was the number of diaspora members who are in different facets of this climate ecosystem, right? Whether it's a UN Assistant Secretary General, to people running NGOs, to people funding centers for sustainability, to so many things that are very positive changes within our world. It is great to see the diaspora so involved, right?
That's exactly right, Amar. And we are learning as we go. I mean, as we become the conveners of the global diaspora leaders in different fields, whether it's climate like you saw today, whether it's philanthropy, politics, and government, business. I mean, we are always so pleasantly surprised by the number of Indian diaspora leaders who are so involved at the highest levels of their professions and are using their influence and their positions to really advance the social agenda for the social good. That's what is most inspiring.
And it's also heartening to see our friends from the UK, people like Rob Swan and Jane Burston, so involved and dedicated to helping India as well. So I think the goodwill and stuff for helping India is far greater than the country itself. And one thing that stays with me that Rohini Nilakani eloquently put it was, what India does and where India goes is where the world is going to go as well. So if India cannot tackle COVID and cannot tackle climate change, it's going to not just be an Indian problem, it's a global issue, right?
Absolutely, exactly right. Couldn't agree more.
And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're closing out the India session of the Indiaspora Climate Summit. And Sanjeev, when do we start the US session for people who want to know this evening? I think it's...
the US session begins at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific time here in the US, which is 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, which in India, as you said, is early. It's 5:30 a.m. in India. But it's a couple of hours session. We hope that some people from India as well can catch at least a portion of it.
Fantastic. With that, I want to thank everyone for attending and thank the Indiaspora team, Mansi and team, for pulling off such a fantastic event. And hopefully this will lead to a lot of positive things to come on the climate change side. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Bye-bye.